Hi book friends, I'm Erin, and this is Charlie, and this is Erin Go Read. This is my September wrap-up. Sometimes naps don't happen. Someone needs a nap. Someone needs someone else to have a nap. But that's okay. We're just going to snuggle. Yeah. And see if we can get through these books. So I'm going to start off with a really fun, great classic. This is Miss Pettigrew Lives for the Day by Winifred Watson. This is a Persephone classic. This was a 5-star read for me. Essentially, Miss Pettigrew is a kind of nanny for hire who doesn't really like children, doesn't like her job, but she needs to make a living, and the agency that she works for mistakenly sends her to the address of Miss LaFosse, who's a bit more worldly than Miss Pettigrew. Miss LaFosse is a nightclub singer, and Miss Pettigrew just kind of gets wrapped up in the day, and she turns out to be really great at solving kind of these social problems that Miss Pettigrew or Miss LaFosse is encountering. She has many male suitors who she is entangled with, and Miss Pettigrew is pretty adept at dealing with these gentlemen. And so Miss Pettigrew ends up getting involved with Miss LaFosse's life, and what starts out as being very kind of judgmental of these differences in their lifestyles. She starts to kind of open herself up to it a bit, and really she lives for a day, and she kind of, Miss Pettigrew experiences the life of someone more like Miss LaFosse for the day, and what would happen if you kind of see how the other lived and mix things up a bit and have new experiences. Wouldn't it be great if she just fell asleep here in my lap while we're taping? That probably won't happen. But so Miss Pettigrew basically gets this opportunity. She takes the opportunity to really live for a day, and she ends up going out for the evening activities with Miss Pettigrew and is open to so many more new experiences. So this reminded me kind of a classic version of like a Frederick Bachman character. So Miss Pettigrew, a bit like a Uva or a Brit Marie. It's this character who seems very kind of set in their ways at the beginning, and then through experiences with other characters and kind of being opened up to broader things in life, really kind of grow, and as they grow personally, they really grow on you, the reader. So I really, really enjoyed this book. For Space Opera September, I reread Binti, the first Binti. Most of it does take place on a ship while the character Binti is on her way from her homeworld of Earth and what seems to be an African village or country. It's not exactly clear, but she's the first of her people to leave to go to UMSA University. UMSA University is not only humans, so she's different in that she's a subset of the people in that she is human, and then she also is the only from her tribe, so she's the only of her people where they do like this clay mixture that they put all over their skin, and they put it in their hair and everything, so even among the humans, she is separate, and she has an ability that no one else has. She is what is known as a harmonizer, and she uses that skill. And this was a great reread. I gave Binti 4 stars. And another 4-star book for Space Opera September was Becky Chambers' novella, To Be Taught If Fortunate. So in this book, we have... You like it? You got the hiccups. So it is the 22nd century, and space explorers on the mission Lockeye, narrated for us from the perspective of Ariadne, are on a mission, an 80-year mission, to explore 4 habitable Earth-like planets. A technology known as somaforming allows them basically to adapt their own DNA in order to in order to adapt to whatever new environment they are headed to, in order to, first of all, survive there, but also survive there with as little impact as possible to the new environment. In between destinations, A to B, B to C, C to D, etc., they are in this almost like hibernation state, somaforming, where their genetics are actually being adapted to their next destination. I don't want to go deeply into the plot, just give you the premise there. What this book does so well is really shows a great curiosity and joy for learning. There are scenes where these astronauts are going onto these new planets and discovering, like amoebas in a frozen puddle. And it is just the way that she's writing their excitement over this discovery. Just makes you want to pick up a microscope and, go scoop up some pond scum. Ultimately, this crew faces an unexpected challenge, which speaks really to the nature of exploration and discovery. It examines whether we seek information in order to further humankind and our long-term survival, or is discovery for the sake of knowledge its own reward. This certainly doesn't get into as great a depth as Becky Chambers' other works, like the Wayfarers trilogy, because it's a novella. And I really think that learning and discovery and the joy of that is really the meat and potatoes of this book. Also for Space Opera September, I read A Closing Common Orbit by Becky Chambers. This is the second book in the Wayfarers trilogy. We follow an AI who was formerly in a ship, who is now, due to circumstances, in a human form, or a human-like form, and she is befriended by an engineer named Pepper, and so we follow kind of their current journey, as well as we go back in time and get Pepper's perspective. Pepper's growing up, and she lived a very interesting life of her own, and has a very interesting kind of origin story. My goodness. So Pepper was originally known as Jane 23, I think, mostly just Jane, and so we basically get the current timeline with Lovelace and Pepper, and then the past timeline with Jane and how she got to be who she is now. Another great book from Becky Chambers. That's another 4-star read for me. Okay. I guess since we're doing Space Opera September, I might as well finish it up with Dune. I did end up finishing this. If you saw the vlog where I was reading it, you maybe were on the edge of your seat to know if I actually did finish it, and I did, thanks to the audiobook. So it was a combination of physically reading the book and listening to the audiobook, and I definitely have to say that because there's so many different characters and like political scheming things going on, the audiobook definitely made that more challenging to keep up with. But essentially we have a chosen one story. We start off with the family of Paul, who is on one planet, and then they have to go to another planet, Arakeen, also known as Dune. His father's been given a new assignment on Dune, and taking over for the Baron Harkonnen. So what was really cool about the audiobook is Baron Harkonnen is played by James Earl Jones. And unfortunately, Baron Harkonnen is not actually in the book all that often, but when he was, it was so cool. I was running while I was listening to that part, or at least parts that he was in it, and James Earl Jones is like Darth Vader. So that part was super cool. There were parts of this that I really enjoyed. I particularly enjoyed the scenes with Paul, who is thought to be the chosen one, the Kwisatz Haderach, trained in his mother's kind of religious sect, I suppose, the Bene Gesserit, and when he respects his mother a lot and her training and her ability, and then when she starts to recognize that he is the Kwisatz Haderach, her respect for him and deferral to him and kind of awe of him was really great. And then also his still though recognizing at the experience and the depth of training that his mother had. So I really liked how they both were in awe of each other and really respected one another, still recognized that, okay, she's not picking up on this, or he hasn't learned this yet. So they would have these little internal things about the other, but ultimately they really, really respected each other and their abilities. So I really appreciated that. This is only a 3-star for me overall. Mostly I felt like I was just getting through this, and then there were parts that I really did enjoy. So there is some, political scheming here. There is some, like politics in general. Someone has an idea of how they're going to be able to make everything better for everyone, and everybody has their own idea of how that is going to work. And of course, personal biases and prejudices and personal gain often get in the way of that being accomplished. Then we have Miracle Creek by Delia Owens. This one I did read, I think, almost entirely via audiobook, a lot of it while running. And this is such an atmospheric book. Now, my personality is that sometimes I don't want to do something because it's popular. And this is one of those books that I kept hearing from people in my personal life, from particularly American booktubers. This was really a great book, and I was just skeptical about it for whatever reason, and I really shouldn't have been. This book is basically, it's about a girl who pretty much has to fend for herself. On North Carolina coast, she is known as the Marsh Girl, and she has had very little parenting and support, and she really has to learn to fend for herself and to make kind of the right relationships. So this is very much a book about survival and self-reliance and friendship. And one thing I found really interesting was that the closest people she had to real family was a black market owner and his wife, who did what they could to help take care of her, bringing her clothes and kind of kitchen items and things from the people at their church, of course a black church. And whereas Jumpin' is the man's name, Jumpin', the black man, is certainly prejudice is shown towards him. But even though Kaya, our main character, is a white girl, she still faces the same kind of prejudices that the black characters do, because she is the Marsh Girl, and she's seen by kind of the proper white folks as dirty and not well bred, and she's literally shunned by these people, including a pastor's wife, which is just despicable. So we watch Kaya grow up, and despite not being afforded an education, she educates herself. And so I thought this was an interesting look at the difference between intelligence and education, or opportunity for education, and what does intelligence actually mean, and what can be accomplished through kind of your own personal means and necessity. For much of her life, really survival is at the root of all her is at the root of her education, and then her survival and curiosity for the nature around her ends up turning into a great education, and she is like the premier expert on the marsh. I can't think of a character that I've had so much genuine affection for in a really, really long time. I love Kaya. I was sad when this book was over that I had to leave her. We end up getting like a murder mystery in here, which I was not expecting, and that goes really well. And then we have Kaya, of course, has relationships throughout the book, and so we explore those relationships as well. One thing that I loved about the structure of this book is that we have like a past and a present timeline that kind of end up meeting each other. So we have Kaya in the present day, and we have Kaya in the past, and the past literally catches up to the present, and I thought that was a really cool way of structuring the story. Then we have Miracle Creek by Angie Kim, and this is kind of a murder mystery we have a couple, it's the Sioux, right? The Ewes, a Korean American family, have this hyperbaric chamber in like a barn on their property, and they provide hyperbaric oxygen chamber therapy. And at the beginning of the book, this chamber, horrifically explodes, and 2 people are killed, including one of the children, one of the boys, and it is ultimately the mother of that boy, who is not in the chamber at the time of the explosion, who is on trial for the murder. So we also know that from the very outset, we know that the Ewes are lying about something, and we don't know what that is or why that is, and so that is explored throughout the book. There were so many twists and turns in this book, and where I would think I know who did it, and it wasn't who it was. So as far as a mystery goes, I really enjoyed it in that manner. But especially if you have a child with special needs, or any sort of caregiving that you're doing for anyone of any age, there's some really good commentary on what it's like to be that caregiver, how other people will perceive you, whether it's that you're trying to do everything right and therefore you're thought to be judgmental of everyone else, or whether you are just trying to survive and get by and do whatever you can, so then you are looked at as feeding your child junk food and not providing with the best possible care you can. This looked at topics from a lot of different angles, because we have so many different perspectives from people. So we hear from people who are on the stand. We hear them give their testimony during the trial, and then we hear from them, conversations from one person about another person. So we're getting all this backfilled information. So this was like a puzzle being put together, and you would have, a section of the puzzle almost complete, but it's missing a couple pieces. You'd have several pieces around the puzzle, or several sections around the puzzle that are mostly formed, but you're still missing a few pieces, and then things just start layering in and filling in those gaps. 5 stars for Miracle Creek. I think I forgot to mention also 5 stars for Where the Crawdads Sing. Editing Erin here, I successfully got the baby transferred into her bed, and she fell right back to sleep. And I realized I forgot one of my favorite books of the month. That was the graphic novel version of The Handmaid's Tale. So I would like to pick up the Testaments soon, but I didn't want to do so without kind of refamiliarizing myself. And I thought that the graphic novel would be a new and quicker way to do that. And I just thought this was done so well. I mean, the art is great. See if I can get, here's an example of one of the spreads. So we have a lot of kind of black and white and gray tones with the pops of color, the red, or let me find one. In some cases, the green with the Marthas. And I think this did a really excellent job of picking the right kind of dialogue and the right words to use, essentially, in order to tell the story, with the graphics providing more of the background information. And that's an interesting thing for me with a graphic novel adaptation like that. A year or so ago, I picked up the graphic novel of The Lottery by Shirley Jackson from my library, and after I read it, I went and picked out, I have an anthology of short stories, including the Lottery, and I just went and compared some sections of how it was written and described in the original story, and then how it was portrayed in the graphic novel. And it just, the feelings and the setting that the graphic evokes fills in all those descriptive gaps in a very different way, and it leaves a similar impact, but you've experienced it in a different way. So if you are a Handmaid's Tale fan, or you would like to read The Handmaid's Tale, but you don't want to read the whole novel, I highly recommend the graphic novel. It'll also make a really great Christmas present. Well, guys, we did it. We got through all of those books, and we put the baby to sleep. Thank you for being so quiet. I'd love to know if you've read any of these books, or are you interested in any of these books? Are you a big Dune lover? Did you participate in Space Opera September? Have you read Where the Crawdads Sings or Miracle Creek? Thank you for watching. See you around the tubes. Shh.